Hello and welcome to Rando Tech Info. So today we're talking about flagships, specifically 2020 flagships as they compare to 2019 flagships and the value prospects between the two. Now, before we get started, I don't want to rain on your parade. If you're somebody who's already bought a 2020 flagship, or you're somebody who likes to have the latest and greatest tech to put in your pocket, don't let me talk you out of it. I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that you're stupid or you're a moron or you've made a bad choice if you get a 2020 flagship. If you like having the latest and greatest technology, then live your truth. Be you. Get it, enjoy it, have fun with it. I love getting new tech. I'm a tech guy, after all. I have a tech YouTube channel. So of course the idea of getting a new phone or a new tech anything is always very appealing to me. But I feel like right now in the flagship phone, smartphone space, that there's some really good deals to be had on the 2019 models of these phones as opposed to the 2020 version of these devices. Now you could make this argument any year that last year's flagships always provide greater value than this year's flagships, but I feel this year that is particularly the case. Like I said before, if you want the latest and greatest, get it, but I do think there's something to be said for getting a good value. I call it bang for your buck. My man Brandon on This Is Tech Today calls it delight for dollar ratio. And his theory is, and I agree with it, is that if you get a good deal on something, if you pay less for something or feel like you got good value, you're going to actually enjoy using that product more than if you feel like you overpaid for it or if you feel like you may have paid too much. So once again, this is just about value. This is about getting almost top of the line for a lot less money as opposed to spending a lot more money for just what I consider to be some incremental upgrades. So let me give you some specific examples of what I'm talking about. So in my hand right here is a OnePlus 7T. This is the phone I bought for myself in October of last year. It's been working great for me. I really like it. Obviously, OnePlus is on a 6-month release cycle, so every 6 months they do come out with something better. So the next phone to come out, now obviously just released last week, is the OnePlus 8. That is the replacement for this device. So let me tell you what is different and what is the same about these two devices. And by the way, this phone right now can be bought on OnePlus's website for $499. Okay, so basically $500. The 8 is $699, so $700. So there's a $200 difference between these two phones. So just keep that in the front of your mind as I talk about these two things, that you're paying $200 more for the 8 than the 7T. So let's start out with what these phones have in common. They both have HDR 10 plus certified screens at 6.55 inches with 90 hertz refresh rates. They both have 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage, at least if you get the base model of the Pro, which is what we're comparing here. If you want the 12 gigs and 256 storage, then you're looking at more money. So for that $200 difference, for the sake of comparison here, those are the same. They both use the same primary 48 megapixel camera sensor. They both film in 4K at 60 frames per second. They both have ×2 telephoto lenses. They both also have 16 megapixel 2.2 aperture wide angle lenses. In fact, the only difference between the two is that the 7T's wide angle lens is 117 degrees wide, whereas the 8's is only 116 degrees wide. They both run Oxygen 10 out of the box, and they both have 30-watt charging. It is also worth noting that neither of these phones have an IP rating or wireless charging. So what exactly are the differences between these two phones? I can come up with 4 major, or what you might consider significant differences. You may not even consider these to be significant based on what your priorities are. But I count 4. I count the battery. There's a 3800 milliamp hour battery in the 7T compared to a 4300 milliamp hour battery in the 8. The 8 obviously has the latest and greatest Snapdragon processor in it, the 865, as opposed to the 855 Plus found in the 7T. You will get 5G on the 8 that you won't get on the 7T. So if 5G coverage matters to you, then that's something to consider, although we're going to talk about that here in just a second as well. The only other difference that I can really think of is the screen. Going back to the screen, the specs are the same, but the 8 has a very steep, curved, almost a waterfall display screen on it, whereas the 7T screen was completely flat. I actually prefer flat screens. I feel like most people at this point do, but that's obviously a personal preference thing. I would say though, if you prefer a flat screen, then the 7T in some ways is a superior phone to the 8. So one more quick comparison I'm going to make, and I'm not going to go into all the details I just went into with the OnePlus devices, but it's with Samsung and their S series. The S10 Plus from last year can be picked up for $849, so basically $850, and the S20 Plus can be picked up for $1199, or basically $1200. Once again, you've got a difference between the processors here. The 10 is obviously using last year's processor as opposed to the S20, which is using the 865 processor. The screen is, I believe, 3/10 of an inch bigger on the new S20 Plus, so you're getting a little bit bigger screen. The resolution, I believe, is the same. The big difference between the screens, obviously, other than the size, is that the S20 series is pushing those high refresh rates. They've got the 120 hertz refresh rates on them, whereas the S10 series from last year only has the standard 60 hertz. I would argue, however, that some people can't tell the difference. In fact, my son and I did a video, if you want to click on it and watch it up here, in which we tried to figure out if we could even tell the difference between high refresh screens and non. I could not tell the difference at all. He could tell the difference, but only after looking at one for a very long time and then switching over to the other. So maybe you're one of those people who swear by high refresh and you really, really like them and want them. And if so, make sure you make that a priority. But I'm not sure everybody can tell the difference. Once this lockdown is over, if you're not sure whether or not you need a high refresh screen or not, I would recommend you go into one of your local carrier stores or into a Best Buy or a Walmart or whatever. Look at a high refresh screen phone next to a non-high refresh screen phone and see if you could even tell the difference. If you can't, then you don't need to worry about this stuff. You don't need to worry about the high refresh rate screen craze that's going on right now. You can pick up an LG V60 instead, or pick up another flagship from last year for less money and not have to worry about missing out on something that you can't even really tell the difference with anyway. The other big jump you get with the S20 series is obviously the ability to use 5G. Other than that, everything else on this device is an incremental upgrade. Yeah, it's going to run slightly faster. Yeah, the benchmark scores are going to be higher, but in real world use, I highly doubt normal people are going to even be able to tell the difference with those minor bumps. You're paying an extra $350 for a lot of changes and improvements that odds are you won't even notice. And oh, sorry, almost forgot. The S10 still has a headphone jack, whereas the S20 does not. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to come back around to the point of 5G. A big part of the reason why these phones are costing more this year as opposed to last year, and why the jump is just so particularly pronounced from 2019 and 2020 is 5G. My thought is this: millimeter wave 5G is not useful now. I don't know that it will be useful ever. That's that super fast 5G that you see advertised sometimes. That 5G only travels a few hundred yards away from 5G towers. So unless you're nearby a 5G tower, you're not getting millimeter wave 5G, and it can't pass through objects. So if you're indoors or standing behind a tree, for example, you're not getting millimeter wave 5G. A lot of phones that say that they're 5G phones don't even have use of millimeter wave 5G. So even if you get a 5G phone and you happen to be within a few hundred yards of a 5G node and you want to use 5G, there's a very good chance your 5G phone won't even use it. One specific example of this is the OnePlus 8. The version that's going to be sold at Verizon is the only version that will actually be able to use their millimeter wave 5G, and that version of the phone actually costs $100 more. Low band 5G, which travels much further, isn't that much faster than 4G. So if you get low band 5G on your device, then yeah, you may see an incremental speed increase, but nothing significant. So you're paying hundreds of dollars for a slight speed increase. Now, Sprint right now has mid-band 5G wavelength that they can use, and T-Mobile will probably get a hold of that and start using that with their phones sometime here in the very near future. That might be a slightly more practical solution, but even still, I doubt it's something you're really going to notice in the day-to-day use on your phone. Not to mention that most people don't download and upload things over their network carriers anyway. They do it on Wi-Fi. So if the main thing you're doing when you're away from your home is just texting or checking your social media feeds or talking on the phone, then you really don't need faster data speeds than what you're already getting with 4G. Those are just my 2 cents on 5G. Once again, if it's something important to you, then make sure that's something you get on your device. But I do think for the masses, it's probably something a little bit overhyped and a little bit overrated. Look, once again, to wrap this up, I'm not trying to tell you what to do or to not buy a 2020 flagship. Once again, if that's what you really, really want, then by all means, go out, get it, enjoy it. But I would argue that the 2019 flagships do offer a much better practical value as far as what you're getting for the money. In my opinion, most of the upgrades on the 2020 flagships are options or things that you either don't need, won't use, or won't notice. And from that perspective, to pay an extra, several $100s over a last year flagship just does not provide as good a value. And I feel like for most people, the vast majority of people, that last year's flagships are just the way to go. Well, those are all the thoughts I have to share for today. If you have your own thoughts about this, please feel free to put those down in the comments so other people can learn from your perspectives. As always, I hope you found this video useful. I appreciate you watching, and until next time, this is Rando Tech Info signing out.